Everybody, if you could take your seats, please. I'm going to hand over, we've made a call, I'm going to hand over to the Chief Executive and then I'll tell you what the process is. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillors, I'll start by saying on behalf of the staff, I've got a professional responsibility to keep this process safe and to make sure that you have confidence in it and that people watching and otherwise invested have confidence in it. We've had some new information and while I don't want to leave the impression here and now that there's been some bad faith here, the fact is there is another letter from that same organisation which I think in good faith staff have taken to mean one thing that's been called into question. Okay, there are questions potentially raised about other inputs to this decision making. My guidance to you is that we do not proceed with this item today, that we adjourn this item, and we've discussed with Sandra, it is open to you to leave this for a week in order that we can clarify some matters and make sure that we're confident that what we're putting in front of you is robust, including clarifying all of the different players in this motorsport landscape, and there are a number, and there is potentially some room for confusion about what those different interests, what role they play in the scheme. So my guidance is that later in proceedings today, we adjourn this meeting with a view to reconvening it in a week's time for the purpose of addressing this issue, and that in the interim, we fix any problems that might give rise to procedural concern.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. So I will move that this item lays on the table for a 1 week and the meeting will reconfirm after that. Do I have a seconder, Councillor Bartley? Thank you very much. All those in favour say aye.
Or can I speak to this?
Yeah. Can we speak about this?
Next week would be a continuation of this meeting with adjournment in the interim.
Well, no, because we've just made the call 30 seconds ago.
Can you confirm that as a result that we will not be able to ask questions in regards to what has now been put up? I thought we could, understanding orders, even though it's an item to defer. Can I get some clarification around that, please?
I'm happy for anyone to ask any questions, so I'm happy to take your question.
So if that's the case, yes, I can be either put on the list because I have some questions around this decision and I just need to clarify those with either the officers or with the CEO and yourself, Chair.
Your question's around the deferral.
The question is around the deferral.
Right.
And more importantly, the impact that this one will either have and look, if I can ask the questions, that'll be great if that's okay.
Why don't you lead off then, Councillor Filipina?
Tēnā kōrua. Look, what impact, and I know this is a week, but what impact will this have on the decision that we will make in another week's time?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question through the Chair. As set out in the report, the timeframes are very tight in order to give effect to the proposed decision. But the advice we've received is that 1 week is probably can be accommodated. It does make things. The more time goes on, the harder it gets. But one week is we've been told is can be accommodated.
Supplementary in reading, and this is about the new chair's recommendations, and it's around the deferral. In the interim week, if there is, how can I put this? If we will we be receiving any information to show us what Speedway New Zealand have actually done for Speedway in Auckland, Western Springs? Will that information come back to us?
Councillor, the intention would be, the answer to your question is yes. We would, the intention would be to provide some further information that clarifies the roles of and responsibilities of the various players in the space, which is, I think, a bit confusing for some councillors and certainly for myself, in terms of the acronyms involved and other and so we would present information and clarify as best we can the position of each of those organisations, what they do and how, and their position on the decision before you, so that there's no confusion about that.
Kia ora. Chair, can I put my name down to speak to this particular item as well around the deferral? Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. Councillor Walker online.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair. So the question I've got that goes to deferral goes like this. We haven't moved into debate. We're still considering the report from officers, and we're at a point where we're asking questions. I'm making the assumption that by deferral in a week's time, we will continue to have the opportunity to have information from officers and answers to questions. Is that the case?
Yes.
Okay. The further issue that I've got is I attended the workshop yesterday. I raised a number of questions. I also put a number of questions in writing. I haven't had a response to those questions, certainly not directly. I have a number of questions that I was going to ask. My preference, if at all possible, would be to bring some of these questions to the attention of officers within the next week, so that it's possible to expedite the answers to those questions. So I just want to see if that is possible, because obviously an additional week is an improvement on the very rushed process that we've had to date.
Councillor Walker, Phil Wilson speaking. Yes, those questions would be welcome and as soon as possible would be useful.
Okay, that's great. In a situation where I don't have answers to those questions, that becomes very difficult given the time frame. So I would hope that the officers are able to expedite the answers, even though they may not be so comfortable, and mindful of the way councillors have been treated around information in the past around the stadium process. So I'll take your response as a yes to that, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lee.
Yes, I welcome the decision by the Chief Executive. We wrote, Councillor Watson and myself did write to the Chief Executive requesting a deferral, so I appreciate that very much. May I request of the Chief Executive that in assessing this latest information and weighing it, he has due regard to the mandatory requirements of the Local Government Act around decision making. He's heard me talk about this before. Speedway is not the only affected party here. As the Act says, a local authority must, in the course of its decision-making process to a matter, give consideration to values and preferences of persons likely to be affected by or to have an interest in the matter. And I do raise the situation with the Ponsonby Rugby Club. And the Ponsonby Rugby Club, according to Sir Brian Williams this morning in a communication to me, is adamant that it wants to stay at Western Springs. It understands that as part of this manoeuvre, Kātaki Auckland Unlimited wants to evict them from their home at Western Springs. I'll make the point, there's 45 junior teams in the Ponsonby Rugby Club.
This on the deferral question?
Okay, I'll leave it at that. I'll
Thank
talk
you.
about it later. That's my request to the Chief Executive, to please consult with the Ponsonby Rugby Club, and I recommend you talk to Sir Brian Williams.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Newman.
Good morning and thank you. Interesting. With respect to the deferral, I assume that that will allow officers time to get this report presumably significantly amended to reflect what I understand is a different stakeholder position to that which has been reflected, and that the officers will have time to make that amendment, or is this simply the same advice, the same paper, the same recommendations, just sitting in there for a week for us to have another go next time?
Councillor, thanks for the question. I think, and through the chair, we will do some work to understand the position of the stakeholders, in light of the new information we've received today. And if we need to change our advice as a result of that new information, we will do that. We'll obviously need to consider that once we've received that new information, and make sure that you have it available.
Right, thank you, Councillor Turner.
Thank you. Who is the 1 week deferral pleasing, the builders or councillors? What happens if we come back in a week and then choose to defer for some length of time? I point out that, this is a new subject to me as a councillor. It is, the first I heard about it was emails from the public Wednesday last week, and it has consumed my time with substantive communications. I see I too was copied in to that Speedway letter, but I know that others weren't. There's a lot of information here. This is a big subject, and I can't do my due diligence in 1 week, I don't think. So what happens when we come back after 1 week's deferral and just defer again?
Well, Councillor, we do acknowledge the timeframes here, right, and the pressure that puts you under. I think the Chief Executive has addressed, I suppose, the question of why we're bringing it before you, because if as staff we made the decision to defer this, essentially we would be making the decision for you because it would no longer be available because of the timeframes. So in a week's time, if it comes back here, it will still be available to defer the item, but it will also be available to proceed. And if you deferred it by longer, the advice we've got here is, at the moment, is that would essentially make the decision this will no longer be available. So I think what we're asking for is an opportunity to gather more information, make sure that we have the complete picture in terms of where the stakeholders stand, and to take Councillor Lee's point, the full universe of stakeholders, and present to you the best possible information that we can, and then the governing body will be in a position to make a decision, and it will be available to you to defer it further.
Thank you. I reserve my right to speak, please.
Councillor Watson.
Just a follow-up question to the CEO. This is a delicate matter. I would remind councillors that last time the Western Springs issue came up, the then Chief Executive, Stephen Town, had to conduct an investigation into serious allegations of harassments and ultimatums being made during negotiations to relocate Speedway. That's on the public record. Okay, I'm quoting from an article in the New Zealand Herald at that time. So my concern is that as much as that issue was brought up, there are other ones here. There's ones that the CEO has been made aware of and has responded to in terms of the process, but there are other matters going to the probity of this process. So I guess, Mr. CEO, what I'm asking is that there are a number of vulnerable groups here that are part of negotiations or arrangements that that affect not just their sport but their livelihood, and it would have seemed to me that the same people who have been conducting matters to date will be going back to those same groups. Now, in the interests of due process and confidence in terms of communications, given what people have been telling us about those communications to date, and given that background of harassment and ultimatums historically concerning this matter, what confidence then can we have that that there's a degree of independence and neutrality here, where people are free to speak openly as opposed to being under some duress, which unfortunately is the anecdotal feedback we're getting from some groups.
Councillor, I'd probably caution us about going too far down that path. If there's any specific knowledge of concern, then I would welcome it being shared, and we will look at that. I'm not aware of anything that calls into question the integrity of and approach of individuals here, but by all means share that with me. We do have council officers working alongside Tātaki Auckland Unlimited officers, and two of them are sitting at the front today, and we will work with them to ensure that the process is defensible, sound, appropriate.
Right, thank you. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. I've just been reviewing again page 15 of the agenda, which looks at deferral delay and gives the sort of the summary of that. What I want to understand a bit more, speaking to the deferral decision, is the issue about the Tātaki funding and that potentially being off the table if we defer for too long. So can I just understand that a little bit more about what the time pressures are on that? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. It might be best for Nick Hill to answer that question.
Kia ora. The constraint on time isn't the funding side. The constraint on time is the building critical path. And the decision, the contingent decision that the board has made is that funding is available subject to the governing body agreeing to proceed, and that's within this financial year.
So thanks, Nick. Because that's kind of how I read this, but what I want to just understand a little bit better, sorry, I might be being a bit obtuse here, is so we need to make a decision shortly if we are going to do it in time for the 25-26 season, right? Some of the works. If we don't decide in time for press and go on those physical works, Tātaki no longer has the money available. That's the thing I'm trying to understand.
The board hasn't made any decision to put any limit on that. It probably will need to as it develops its budgets for future years.
Okay.
It was contingent on the ability to undertake these works now so that Speedway could consolidate in the next season. I think if that doesn't happen, then everybody will have to go back to consider their positions.
Yeah, so because a number of the other people have their supporters contingent on meeting that time frame. That's correct. Okay, that gives me a much better understanding of the urgency. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question I have, and I guess the reason for, and I did read that letter and I did read it as support, but I guess the other letters do talk about support for the investment, but also about the closure of Western Springs. So, but I guess my question is, I know we have stock cars and the leaseholder for Speedway at Western Springs here. Can I just check that those groups, the actual, and I'm thinking sort of like NZRU versus North Harbour Rugby having different views. if Speedway New Zealand aren't in favour, but actually, can I just check that the Speedway Western Springs, the leaseholder, and Waikaraka Stock Cars, they're in favour of this? Like, they're aware. These are the Auckland representatives who are...
Yeah, Councillor, that's correct. The manager and operator of the current Western Springs Speedway, we've worked very collaboratively with, are supportive of this and are in fact present today. We will clarify that in the further information in terms of how it all fits together.
But I guess I have concern about delay if we're... Yeah, I guess it's clarifying that one letter. That I guess maybe it's a question for Phil. The reason for delay is because the letter, even though there's a letter of support for the investment in Waikaraka maybe from the New Zealand body, but it's definitely my understanding that the Auckland bodies that we have the relationships with are in favour. Like, it's not a surprise to them.
Let me be quite clear. The basis of my recommendation to you is that I want you to have confidence in this procedurally and that you've got the right and robust advice in front of you. My advice is not based on the merits of any particular aspect of this argument, and it's not based on, it's not to be taken as any comment about the views being put forward by individual groups. It's simply a procedural matter from my point of view to keep this process safe and to have your decision at the end of the day defensible.
Okay, but I just want to clarify, because whenever anything comes to this table in my experience, and even before on stadiums, it gets very controversial very quickly. But our relationship, can I just check, is with the Auckland bodies, like all our sports fields and all our... and they are well aware of what is proposed and what is... This is not a blindside for Speedway Western Springs owners and operators.
That's correct.
Right, thank you. Councillor Baker.
So yeah, two questions. And so with the historic investigation being floated out there, are we able to see the result of that investigation? Because it's one thing to have an investigation, it would have had an outcome. So are we able to, when you were presenting back, Councillor Watson has chucked out into the ether the Stephen Town's investigation into impropriety, it would seem. So it'd be good to see what the outcome of that was, so that we know how relevant it is, because it's been floated out there. The other one is just in regards to that, and I guess clarification, ensuring that we have clarification as to the mandate of the organisation that has provided an email to some of the councillors. The irony of the transparency comments are not lost on me, that the mandate of that organisation to, I guess, control what local organisations do. For me, it's tantamount to the New Zealand Rugby Union telling unions around the country where they should play rugby, and I think we all know the answer to that. So if we could have that very, very clear as to their mandate to determine where local sport within their realm is held, would be very, very helpful.
Yes, we'll clarify that. And to your other point, I will share what I can with you in relation to any previous investigation. From memory, there's an employment aspect that may constrain it slightly, and it's probably more appropriate that I send a briefing note to councillors rather than include it in a report.
Thank you. Councillor Bartley.
Oh, thank you. I don't really want to defer this. I want to deal with it now, because it's been since 2017 that this has been on the table. But I'm reading the room, and I respect that some councillors want more information given this current letter. My question is, the withdrawal of Speedway support is not listed as a risk in the report. The risk is if Western Springs Speedway withdraws their support. Western Springs being Palmerston North Speedway Limited Bruce Robertson sitting back there. So why is it that we are all up in arms when we knew there was opposition by Speedway, by drivers? Why can't we carry on with the information that we have? Why can't we hear from Bruce? We've heard from the local board. We knew games were going to happen, and clearly it's happened today. Auckland Stock and Saloon Car Club is the only option that has longevity of tenure. Western Springs doesn't. It ends next year. So I thought we were doing Speedway a favour by providing them an option to future-proof their sport. Clearly, they don't see it that way. So it's not listed here as a risk. We've got the support of Auckland Stock and Saloon Car Club, Western Springs Speedway. If we can proceed, I'd like to, but I am respecting those councillors that are worried.
Thank you, councillor, and through the chair. Look, I don't want to overstate the concern here, but I think that the point is that some fresh information has become available. It changes some aspects of the report. You're quite right. It doesn't. It certainly doesn't on its own change the advice that we would have, but it is important, I think, to keep this process safe and to make sure you're able to make a decision that is robust, to make sure that you have accurate information, and that's why we want the advice of the chief executive is that a limited deferral is required, or his advice to you is that some time is needed so that further information can be gathered. But I think your point's well made.
And if I may, please, Madam Chair, what if we get to next week and we get another email during our meeting? Then what do we do? For another group?
I think, if I may, the point of concern is we've put up a report which, through new information, we may have misrepresented the position, we may not, of an organisation. We just want to clarify that. If other emails come in from other organisations, what we'll be trying to do over the next week is clarifying exactly that all the sort of stakeholder groups that are referenced in this report, that their views accurately represent what we've put in the report. We've got a professional obligation to bring to you accurate information.
Good questions. Councillor Williamson.
This is very brief, but it's more to do with my own personal sort of anxiety about next week. I've made a reasonably important booking for next Thursday out of Auckland, which took some weeks to get planned. Can you call a governing body meeting at that short notice, which is going to be less than a week because it'll be 10 o'clock, and we've got some slots on Wednesday, governing body hold, which I've got them in my diary so I could easily attend. But somehow, out of the blue, we do that all the time. We hold blocks for governing body, and now we're going to strike the calendar when we were told you are free to go and make alternative book. And unless, supplementary to that, we're not allowed to take part in these meetings unless we've got a reason for not showing up. Is that right? We've got to say we're sick or we're incapacitated. Since the 1st of October, we can't just do a Teams and vote if we want to.
Let me just clarify a couple of things. First of all, that there's a deferral of this meeting, which doesn't mean the meeting will be held next Thursday.
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
It can be held at another time, and I'm not going to make that call right now because I'm trying to do multiple things and listen to multiple people at the same time, but it will be made before the end of this meeting today. Quite right. There are 2 governing body holds next Wednesday, and that would be a logical time because they are in the diary. So it doesn't mean that it will be on a Thursday. It will mean that it'll be here, and I will need a quorum. So just bear with us while a few CSAs and a few mayoral office staff just look at some options around that. But what we're doing now is deferring this item and asking questions about that deferral, which are quite rightly to ask. But that's the situation. So it'll be for a maximum of a week. Monday's a public holiday. I can guarantee you it will not be on Monday. All right. Next question. Are you right there? Okay, Ms. Councillor? Great. Yep. Yep. Correct. Councillor Lee, question on the deferral.
Sorry, Madam Chair. In the officer's report, section 21, in reference to the current expression of interest underway for Western Springs Stadium, says that the purpose is to find a higher and better use of Western Springs Stadium.
This is a question on deferral, councillor, remember, not on the item. This is a question, we're just talking about the deferral option.
Okay, I'm coming back to, right, the question leads to the decision-making process that we are deferring, because that process is underway right now. Okay, that's to enable a better decision-making process. A higher and better use for the stadium, which sounds to me like middle-class elitism, but let's put the best interpretation on it, that is entirely well-meaning and objective. It absolutely requires higher and better decision-making than we've seen right up until now, and this goes right back over many years now, where we've had something of a shambles in terms of decision-making. May I also express some concern that the offering of $11 million and then suggesting that it may be withdrawn if the response is not the right one is not higher and better decision-making. And also the reference to Palmerston North Speedway Limited being in support of it, and they've entered into a single season venue. Does that really mean that they've been told that this is their last venue, their last season at that venue, and that they better get on with, better join the program? Is that higher and better decision making? Because if that is the case,
Question on the deferral. Question on the deferral. Don't think that was a point around the deferral, so I'll just let that one go. Thank you. Any more questions on the deferral? Councillor Turner.
We seem to be taking it for granted that the deferral only needs to look at this letter, which is new to the debate, when actually I know how the public want me to vote, and I know how I'd like to vote, but I can't exercise that vote without doing due diligence, and the next week is not just about this letter. So what are we, the deferral, I'm just worried about, yeah.
Councillor,
Does
the
that mean we
officers...
vote now?
The officers will be available to help address any questions in the intervening time. It's an on-balance thing. At the end of the day, as I said right at the start of this item, it's open to you to tell us whether you feel sufficiently informed to make a decision, and that will be a matter for you to consider when we come back. But in the intervening time, we are very happy to make available people to answer any questions and try and create, the right level of comfort that you can proceed.
Thank you.
And just remember, the decision is not whether to put Speedway at Western Springs. It is whether to transfer the money. Any more questions on the deferral?
Just a question on, again, the week. Do we have to, and that's under motions and amendments 1.5, because this is now in front of us, do we have to give, and this is going to be a public meeting when we come back, 7 days notice? I just wanted to do that because of the point that you made, that it could be Wednesday, could be Friday. I just wanted to make sure, understanding orders, that is it the minimum of 7 days do we need to give the public and ourselves when we defer?
The answer Sandra said is no. Thank you. Any other questions on the deferral?
Yes, I've got a question on the deferral.
Councillor Walker.
So in the in the circumstance where there's an opportunity to get clarification and ask questions in the meantime, the assumption that I'm making is that we're going to have a modified agenda item. And further to that, the assumption that I'm making is that there'll be the substantive part of the agenda, but probably an addendum to it that may well be a little later, so that there's time to actually respond to the questions and the issues. Is that understanding correct?
Well, Councillor, I haven't got that detail to provide to you. We need to, after this, go and work out exactly what the right approach is to make sure you're informed for whatever time we reschedule the meeting for.
Yeah, can I just confirm that the reason for this deferral is that we've got information that has been presented today that we didn't have before. In fact, as chair, I don't think I've got it, and that we have just been presented live. It's that, if anything, that is poor process. And what we just need to do is have a look at that letter, because I've only just verbally heard it once. We need to check some stuff, and we will reconvene this item to make sure that we know what we're doing in a few days' time. Any other questions on the deferral?
Through you, Madam Chair, that really doesn't answer my question. I mean, my concern is that the information that we've got across a number of parts of this issue is pretty poor and could be much better. And in a situation where the officers are able to supply us better information, that information should be supplied to us in writing ahead of the reconvened meeting or the deferred meeting or whatever you arrive at to call it. So I have an expectation that I'll receive information as part of the agenda, an amended agenda in writing.
It's a reconvened meeting, and any questions any councillor has always been available to be sent to staff, and they will respond as per normal. Thank you. Any other questions on the deferral? Fabulous. Any comments on the deferral? Councillor Dalton, Councillor Filipaina.
I guess my comment is really to thank the local board and say sorry at the same time. You gave a really passionate presentation to us. This has been a long haul for you, and I'm sorry that we've got pipped at the post in making a decision for you today. In terms of transparency, I think it is unfortunate that people call for transparency and then there is none. I think that the group that has sent the email to a minority of councillors has tripped a process up here. We could have made a decision today if we had all received that email. So there is always risk in trying to lobby a few councillors and not all councillors. And this is a significant decision. It's a big decision. It's a decision that Speedway and the local board have been wanting to have decided for quite some time. I mean, seriously, we were absolutely at risk of doing something today for the first time this term. For the first time this term, we might have got something over the line. But no, again, tripped up. So thank you, Alistair, for your presentation today, and Max, and again the local board, and the people who have come today to watch the governing body make a decision that might take Auckland forward in this stadium area that we've been working on for years and years and years and years and years. So that's all I'd say. It's just frustration, but democracy, I guess, at heart. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. And there's sufficient information in the agenda, but speaking to the deferral, I was definitely against the deferral, still am, but I can understand Phil, you, and also the Chair, and why you needed to defer it. So I understand that, and I will be supporting it. That's because Councillor Bartley seconded the deferral. And again, just talking to this amendment, I would have made the same decision even after hearing what New Zealand Speedway or Speedway NZ said, because I know the history to this. I would have still made my decision, and hopefully when we do adjourn, and even for the 44 people watching it on YouTube, for me, I would definitely be looking at any further information, as you should do under the Local Government Act, to then have all the information for you to make a decision. But that letter, and I'm going to close now because the police are outside, but that letter would have made no difference to my decision. But in saying that, Councillor Watson, the fact that you brought that to our attention is why we've got this deferral. And so that's why I say that, because it's been put in front of us, the deferral now, we got the decision next week. So, I got no issues with that. Councillor Lee, just one thing to you as well, and I also have been in contact with Sir Brian, and I think that is definitely an issue that needs to be addressed. And so I look forward to that as well, whether it be at another meeting with governing body, but for this deferral, and as a result of the staff, but also more importantly, the local board and Councillor Bartley, I will be supporting it, although I've spoken against it. Kia ora.
Right, we have a change in the seconder for the deferral, and that will be Councillor Williamson. Right, next comment, Councillor Walker.
No, I didn't have a comment.
Perfect. Councillor Watson.
Very, very briefly, I just would make the point, the reason the matter's being deferred because it goes to the accuracy and probity of information that's put before us, and that's not a minor matter. I would say, to be fair, that was my first question. I've got more substantive questions to come on other matters to do with Western Springs. And as far as the comment about transparency and the snide remark about process, I have endeavoured to bring up my issues with the CEO in advance of this, because of the very reasons of the rush nature that the way this matter has been conducted, which I think if it had been done in a better way, some of these issues would have been avoided. But I would just say that letter is the tip of the iceberg as far as I'm concerned, and I look forward to the reconvened meeting to raise matters that I regard as far more substantive, notwithstanding the fact that information put before us to make decisions has to be accurate.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The disappointment for me is that, this isn't new. And 2017, Councillor Bartley, when she was chair of the Maungakea Tāmaki Local Board, seconded by Debbie Burrows, said, continue to work with RFA and the stock car operator at Waikaraka and Western Springs operator of Speedway to consolidate and bring these codes together at Waikaraka Park. That was 2017. That was before Councillor Bartley sat around this table. And that was Regional Facilities Plan at the time. And then we always get grumpy at CCOs for not being commercial or not making the stadiums more commercial or not saving money, and we go round and round in circles and continue to change everything they present to us. So I was quite surprised that Speedway and stock cars were actually both in favour of this move, and the local board was completely unanimous. So I thought this would be quite an easy decision today. But I understand that letter, although the letters are printed in full, maybe there was a nuance to that first letter that was slightly different to the others, which mentioned the move from Speedway and the Waikaraka upgrade, not just the Waikaraka. So I understand the reason for deferral, but it is a shame that it does seem like it is not going to be a positive way forward at this stage. But it's a shame we couldn't get this done today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Just briefly, Madam Chair, I I'm not in 100% health, but this issue is so important that I've come along today. I think it's important when we undertake this decision-making process, and I certainly welcome the Chief Executive's decision to defer this. Thank you very much. It's important that we take in the whole picture of the whole strategy, if you will, that is being unrolled here. We've talked about the haste and how inappropriate that is, but I want the Chief Executive in particular to bear in mind that a key part of what Tātaki Auckland Unlimited appears to be intending, its objective, is also to evict the Ponsonby Rugby Club. Now, the Ponsonby Rugby Club is in my ward. Western Springs is in my ward. It's obviously regionally important.
Comment on the deferral? Comment on the deferral, please. Councillor, we're doing a comment on the deferral, not on the outcome. No, I said we've got a comment on the deferral, please.
It is, of course, why are we deferring it? To take on board, to consider further information. I absolutely resent having my microphone cut off.
Point of
Is
order.
that the sort of decision-making process? No. That's
There's a point of order has been called.
Please, that is behaviour.
my concern is to ensure that when this decision is considered, especially by management, that the provisions of the Local Government Act are actually complied with, but also interested parties, as referred to in the Act, are consulted. And a key interested party, which has been told that its tenancy at Western Springs is also going to be terminated, is consulted, because at this stage we're talking about Speedway, but Speedway is the first to be targeted. After that, it's the Ponsonby Rugby Club, and Ponsonby Rugby Club at Western Springs is frankly a cultural icon of Auckland, and therefore its views need to be taken very seriously indeed, and up until this stage it hasn't been mentioned at all, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll now move to comment from Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't support the deferral. I think we have all the information before us that we need to make this decision. Like I said before, this is going back to 2017. And, you know, Tātaki Auckland Unlimited, I wish they didn't have to come to us because they are supporting this. It's their 11 million and they're only coming to us because it's a transfer from the LTP budget. Local board support this, and I'm just disappointed that we've hit this when we're trying to do what's best for the city. The local board is providing us a solution to the situation, and I'm just worried that we get to next week and it's deferred again. And deferred again to the point where we lose the opportunity to make a decision to enable construction to happen as soon as possible for the 2025-26 season. And don't laugh at the back, or you can leave this meeting. But yeah, you know, like, this isn't, Speedway isn't my buzz, okay? I talk about homelessness, I talk about food poverty, our communities, and yet I'm here advocating for Speedway. Why? Because we don't want to see the sport die. It's in my local area, so that's what's brought me into this. And we've got an option here to keep this sport going. So I hope we don't jeopardise that, but I will not support a deferral. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Turner.
I've just realised I got sidetracked. It should be about.
No worries. Thank you. Councillor Ferry, final comment on the financial deferral.
Yeah. Thank you. I wasn't going to speak, but I do want to explain how I'm going to vote on this, because I am very hesitant to support, well, at the start of this conversation, I thought a deferral probably made sense and was a clear way forward where we might be able to come back together in a week and get this done. But some of what I've heard in the debate from some of my colleagues makes me seriously doubt that actually this is a good faith deferral from some. And I understand it is from you, Madam Chair. I'm not casting aspersions there at all. But I am worried that this is a deferral ahead of a vote down. And I'm very moved by what Councillor Bartley has said in terms of the work that has gone in. Alf has spoken also to the history of this. Yeah, I am going to very, very reluctantly probably support the deferral, only because I think, unfortunately, some people have not necessarily in good faith raised questions about integrity that will otherwise end up on the front page of the Herald tomorrow, misrepresenting yet again the good work of our staff and the way that many people have actually worked for many years to get to this outcome. There is a risk that tomorrow we will see stuff going, it was a rush decision, it wasn't legitimate, blah, blah, blah. And the week, says their maximum 2 weeks, will actually give staff the chance to prove themselves, which they shouldn't have to do, but unfortunately they do in this case. And so that is my sole reason now for previously I was like, okay, we're all going to work on this and come back together and do the right thing. I don't have a lot of faith that that's necessarily the case, but I do have a lot of faith in our staff, and I want to give them the opportunity to put to rest once and for all some of the allegations that I think have been unfairly made here today. So I will support deferral.
Thank you. I will just give you a quick comment from the chair. I support the deferral quite simply for one reason. We appear to have conflicting information from one organisation. That's what I want time to clear out. All right, any other comments? Right, I will put it to the vote, and a division has been called. So I'll ask Sandra to call the division on a deferral of a maximum of 2 weeks, as per the resolution on screen. Thank you.
On the deferral, Councillor Baker.
For.
Councillor Bartley.
Against.
Councillor Dalton.
Against.
Councillor Darby.
Against.
Councillor Ferry.
For.
Councillor Filipina. Councillor Fletcher.
Yes.
Councillor Foley.
Against.
Councillor Henderson.
No.
Councillor Hills.
Reluctantly in favour.
Councillor Lee.
Aye.
Councillor Leone.
No.
Councillor Newman.
Yep.
Councillor Sayers.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart. Councillor Turner.
For.
Councillor Walker.
Yes.
Councillor Watson.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Simpson. So that's carried. 14 votes to 6.
Thank you very much. We'll keep the wheels moving and move now to the National